Hi, and welcome to the Handbag Designer 101 podcast with your host, Emily Blumenthal, handbag designer expert and handbag fairy godmother, where we cover everything about handbags from making, marketing, designing, and talking to handbag designers and industry experts about what it takes to make a successful handbag. Welcome, Adrian Furstenburg, to the Handbag Designer 101 podcast. So excited to have you.
Hi, Emily. So good to have you and so good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I love having my Handbag Designer Award IHDA All Star Alums, considering you're part of that group with a big one, right?
It's been one of the most amazing things to be part of it and just to kind of see how the journey from even before I won the award, like being part of it, working up to it and then getting into it, winning it, and then being part of it afterwards has just been such an amazing journey. To see how myself and so many others have been changing lives.
Oh my God. Yeah. Hashtag changing lives. Exactly. So you are originally from South Africa, yeah? And you're in Singapore now.
Yeah, that's correct. So I was born in my hometown of Johannesburg and started the business there. And after
how old were you? How old were you when you started?
When I started. So, we can go way back.
Let's go to the Wayback Machine.
Way back when. So I always had a dream of working in fashion industry. But my dad, who is of German descent and was a farmer, was really, really strict. And he was like, no son of mine is going to study fashion design. And I was devastated because this is my dream. And what happened was I kind of sneakily studied graphic design, but changed my major into textiles because I was just enamored with the industry. And what happened was, unfortunately, I was involved in a big car accident in my final year of study. And therefore, I couldn't do the textile printing that was needed for the practical side of it. So I shifted the prospect to do a project on weaving and then the coloring of certain yarns and had to apply the design to theory as well as history. And so
did he give you a hard time about that?
Oh yeah. It was tough. It was really hard because he thought I was still doing graphic design, but I was actually doing textiles. So the projects looked a little different. But I ended up having this beautiful piece of cloth in my final year that I wove the whole piece of cloth myself. I dyed all of the yarns. I did a really great project on the theory and the history of textiles and so forth. And when I saw this piece of material, a part of me was like, this has to go somewhere. It kind of has to become something. And there was a weave factory just outside of Johannesburg, which is my hometown, that I teamed up with, and I had the cloth turned into 4 handbags. And that's where the passion started. That's where I realized.
How did you know to do that to handbags? Did the factory say you should make it a handbag, or you had the wherewithal to do that on your own?
On my own, because when you see a piece of material, I was like, it has to become something, because if it's just a flat piece of surface, it doesn't really serve any sort of purpose.
Right.
And the idea of a handbag was really cool because it was this great piece of cloth that I could combine with leather, so it looked really cool. But I think as a designer, one part is the aesthetics that's really, really great, but also the functionality of something that really interests me. So that definitely sparked the interest and the love for handbag and accessory design. And of course, growing up in a place like South Africa that has a lot of nature and beautiful, animal kingdom and everything else. I grew up with horses. So in the tack room, leather has been a big part of my life, growing up. So from a practical and historical perspective, I'm teaming it up with the love of beauty and aesthetics and fashion, having these two things come together in a very difficult situation, being in a car accident in my final year of study, did then turn around into what I do as a career today. So looking back, the concept of handbags or being a handbag designer found me rather than me finding it, even though I had a passion for it. And
let me ask you though.
Sure.
Because of the accident, did your father give you a little bit more grace to do what you wanted? You wanted to do?
Yeah, he totally. As a parent, you would understand. As a parent, you want the best for your kids. Growing up in South Africa, that has some political turmoil, and you want your kids to do the best. So the fashion industry in South Africa is notoriously difficult. So I could understand where he was coming from.
Right.
But then having him see me do something that has a sense of commercial viability, it looks really good. The fact that there was a factory that could support any sort of manufacturing changed his idea around fashion a little bit more, which was good. I think if I stuck to clothing or couture or something like that, I think the story would have been a little different. Whereas handbags, from a commercial perspective, and I think most people know this, like it is just more profitable and it's not tied to seasons. So I think all of these elements bake into that story of wanting to become a designer that specializes in accessories and leather goods has been really quite fortunate. And I've stuck to that since. Like, I mean, I'm not veering into any other direction. Like, I'm not sticking with handbags.
My mom's side is German, and there is that definite sensibility of when I went into handbags, it was like, why? It doesn't make any money. And, and yes, and you go on this rant, it's the most profitable segment of fashion, but fashion doesn't make money. I mean, I'm Garmento offspring. So it was like, what are you doing? Only mass makes money and you're not getting into mass and you're not trained. And I think we always continue to carry that burden of trying to prove ourselves constantly, even though now on the other side, being a parent, you just want the best for your kids. So you try to keep them out of things that are going to make their lives more difficult. So I was keen to know, like, having that accident and seeing what you've gone through as a parent, you have to give your child some grace, saying, okay, but it sounds like whatever impact he had, you were able to prove to him, okay, here's the path. Here's where I'm getting the materials. Here's how it's made. Here's what I'm going to, like, you were able to prove that 360 cycle to perhaps quell whatever issues he may have had. Did your mom give you any hassle, or she was like, go for it?
She loved it. I mean, so Tracy, like my dad was, I mean, of course, like when having a son who makes handbags. And so what's interesting, my dad was a farmer and so very entrepreneurial.
So you actually had a farm in your backyard proper?
Well, so we didn't live on the farm. So that was on the outskirts of town. We lived close to town because my mom was cabin crew for our national airline.
No
so
way.
I had these two very different worlds. Like, I mean, really well traveled, being exposed to fashion and other cultures and countries from an early age, as well as having this very pragmatic way of doing things. Like, I mean, plant the seeds, make sure it delivers, harvest, those type of things. So farming and fashion, or farming and travel, like, I mean, these two really opposite industries, like, I mean, served me pretty well, because what I want to backtrack to quickly is, even though there was a lot of adversity, like, I mean, kind of how I got into handbag design, I think looking back at my life, both personally and professionally, usually the most difficult things, it's like alchemy, like, I mean, kind of burns out the impurities and gives you the gold nuggets that you can build something beautiful with. So that's how I see it now. Yeah.
But do you know what's interesting? Someone told me this years and years and years ago, and I find it wild that it still tracks, that without fail, you end up doing what your parents do, whether you want to or not. It follows you and it's ingrained in you, right? Like, I never thought I would actually be in fashion. I never thought I would teach. And that tracks both sides of my parents. And, now what you're doing now, and your mom, and it sounds like because she was a flight attendant that she traveled a lot. So you were with your dad more, perhaps as a result of her trips. So whatever impact
Absolutely.
she had, he was there to lay it down. So you had to kind of keep both sides happy, but then she'd come back and see the beautiful and the fabulous. And, and it sits with you because, I mean, we'll lead up to what you're doing now, which is so exciting, but it checks both boxes, which is totally wild.
No, absolutely. And I'm glad that I can get to a place in my life where I can honor my parents for the impact that they had in my life. As you mentioned, like, my mom traveled a lot. We got exposed to a lot of things, but wasn't there all the time. But what it did give me was, growing up in South Africa, it's beautiful. It's an incredibly beautiful country.
Do you miss it?
I do miss it, but I've got an enormous love for my country and a huge amount of respect for my country because it turned me into the person that I am today. But if I look at it from a pragmatic career perspective, it's kind of suicide to stay in a country like South Africa to try to build an international brand, distribution, hardware, all of these things, like, really just counts against you. So one of the things that my mom has given me on a more philosophical level, I would say, was that planting that seed of wanting to get out, wanting to explore, wanting to grow.
See the world.
Kind of see the world, exactly, because that's where the magic happened. And so being on both sides of it, where I have the pragmatic, very basic sense of, like, doing business, focusing on profit, like, I mean, how do you turn nothing into something, but also having the philosophy of travel and luxury and flight and adventure and different languages. So these two things have had a big impact on my career, but also, of course, as an individual as well. And I try to honor both of those things now.
But, having a father who's a farmer, again, the recognition of all right, I might plant this. Is like, what is that about the chicken? Who's going to help me plant the seeds? Who's going to help me sow the farm? But having to recognize that you need someone to sell it to. And it's a pitfall of so many designers, right? So many. I want to be a designer. I want to get my vision. I want to put something out there that I believe is missing. Now you're making something for women who, it's not you, it's for other people. So perhaps that was ingrained in you, that you knew that you needed to have a customer for everything you did, because that is a pitfall of so many, right? You might want to create something beautiful, but who could buy it? Who can afford it? How often are they going to come back?
That's the thing. I mean, my heritage is European, but I grew up in Africa. My parents and my ancestors, basically, they had to make it work. There was no something to fall back on. You just had to make things work. So I think that entrepreneurial spirit of creating something beautiful, which is the art and the philosophy and the drive to create beauty. But if it just stays on the shelf,
then what?
It's not a business.
Right.
Then it's just, which is wonderful. And don't get me wrong, I love art. But I think it's when there's a commercial value to something, seeing what you put so much love and effort into creating something, seeing somebody else enjoy it and pay good money for it, then it becomes full circle. And that's what I'm about now. I try and read up and be part of a lot of business things, because business is also design. It's also an art. You have to think differently about things.
And I know, and we can get into how you ended up in Singapore and how you ended up making handbags into handbags for what you do. But I love, before unboxing videos became true unboxing videos, you've been doing that for years. And it's just so heartwarming seeing these women who are not the unboxing demographic, seeing them receive your bag, seeing them open it, seeing the emotion, but you're usually there for them to get it. So all these customers, people or they not, how does that path go?
So firstly, I've got to thank you for inviting me back to come and tell my story the year after I won the award in 2016. Because what happened was, when I won the award, I was still employed at a company and I got my design together and everything else. And I went to the United States. It was my very first time to the US. And
wow.
I went to America and I went to New York, and this amazing award. And
what a magical day.
Oh no, it was phenomenal. I still watch that video where I was running out of the hall. So being invited back to come and tell my story has been pivotal to my success, because that's where someone who knew that I started my business in South Africa was interested in ordering a handbag because she had a South African friend. And of course, I was in New York City and I delivered the bag to her and we did an unboxing and we got a few more orders.
Was that in New York or in South Africa?
That was in New York. So that was our first unboxing. And just out of that kind of became very much the natural order of what the Adrian Furstenburg brand is about, which is, from our perspective, luxury is a very, very personal thing because it means various things for different people. And seeing that absolute joy and the fact that we created a handbag for them is almost like the ultimate gift to oneself. They have an idea of what it looks like, but the personal attention that comes with me delivering it to them has been one of our key factors, where we don't really spend a lot of money on marketing. Most of our clients are our ambassadors. And this gets to the answer of your second question. Of course, any sort of business starts with family and friends. And I've had such an incredibly loyal following since the beginning of starting the brand in 2017. And those have become the ambassadors, and people from there have bought and grown. And
because your bags are not inexpensive.
No, they're not. Especially now that we live in Singapore. So that was quite a great story. What happened was, I was based in Johannesburg, launched the brand in 2017. We did really well. We got a lot of sales. People were really interested. The fact that a South African got into the Handbag Designer Awards and won the award gave me a huge amount of publicity. And of course, exposed the brand to a lot of new people. And it was kind of the success story. And I rode that wave, which was wonderful.
Which is what everybody should. And I always say, if you get that attention, ride it until it's done.
Yeah. And that's the thing. So my partner's American and travels a lot for work. And he got a job in Singapore. And so I was traveling a ton. That's also.
Did you meet him in New York? Or did you meet him in Johannesburg?
We met in Johannesburg, actually. So it was Johannesburg and then Indonesia and Senegal and New York. We did a lot of travel. But during that time, he then got a job in Singapore. And the idea was, as any sort of small brand or small business, to go international, that is the penultimate. So the goal was for me to stay in, operate the business from Johannesburg and then kind of quote unquote live in Singapore and travel in between, which made sense on paper. And in
That's
theory,
a long flight.
but it's a very long flight. Like it's a good 12 hours and it just in practice did not make any sense. And what happened was...
Sounds good at the time. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, it was, I mean, the jet lag was insane and I regretted it completely. Well, no, actually, no, I don't regret it. Like I got a lot of air miles. I don't... That flight between Johannesburg and Singapore, I know so well. Like, I mean, I got to familiarize myself with the whole situation, but it's just really hard on the body and the mind to live in two different places. Like that doesn't work. But it's interesting, like you've mentioned, our business model, we create one-off pieces. Like, I mean, that's what the main business is about. So it's an on-demand manufacturing business model. And I was in Hong Kong where a big leather trade event invited me to speak about this specific business model. How does on-demand manufacturing, inshallah, or hopefully create one of the avenues towards a more sustainable future for leather and luxury leather goods? I did my presentation and we got a lot of questions and information and so forth. And I met a company who does manufacturing, small-scale manufacturing, who are based in Singapore, which is quite unusual because Singapore is a tiny nanny state. It's a small island with a big city on it, and it doesn't produce any of its own things. And one of the interesting things is because it's kind of on the equator, so it's tropical, and Singapore's only like almost 60 years old, like 58 years old. Like one of the only things it ever exported was crocodile skin for the luxury industry, like French fashion brands. So this company that I met in Hong Kong was an offshoot of this tannery that basically created all mainly croc skins for brands like mainly Louis Vuitton and then other brands under the LVMH group. The tannery got bought over by the LVMH group in 2011 and then for an undisclosed amount in 2016. And so this then made me think about my production. A tree doesn't grow in two places. So I had to be where my production is.
Right.
So that's when we went back to Singapore. I met them at the studio and it seemed like this fits my business model really well.
Was this organically at the same time as your partner was sent over?
At the same.
What?
Yep. It was such a thing. So now I have access to materials that's used by LVMH brands. Excellent manufacturing. And I can live in Singapore. The only caveat is it is very expensive.
Yeah.
It was really, really expensive. But the great thing about that was we create custom pieces. So the person who pays for a custom bag understands that is going to have a heavier price tag than other brands that you just buy off the street. So
your prices went up?
Prices went up, yeah.
Wow.
So
was that a hard pill to swallow?
So that's an interesting question because, of course, any young designer is like, oh, I want to charge thousands of dollars for handbags. Doesn't make commercial sense.
Right.
No, not always. So that's the interesting thing. Most of my clients actually started paying the prices because they understood the value of having a piece customized for them. So if I can take you a little bit through my customer journey. So they own most of the prestigious brands like Chanel, LVMH, Hermes, and so forth. And mostly places like Singapore, Jakarta, Hong Kong, Dubai, New York, Milan, London. Gifting is a big thing. So do you buy your wife another Speedy or another Liverpool or maybe like a Birkin or a Kelly? Or you could buy a one-on-one with the designer and create a bag for her exactly the way she wants it. So we do measure. There's a little thing that we call design tarot, which is like a tarot card reading where we basically create a bespoke piece based on the person's personality and their taste and everything.
So they're buying the moment with you. It's the whole...
It's the whole package. And then we make it what we call hyper-personalized. So on my social media, one of the ones that sells the best is we would then incorporate some of their kids' drawings, like that is done through marquage technique on or inside the bag. So it is not just a beautiful designer product, like it has this hyper-personalized element to it. So we're really focusing on the sentiment and the symbolism of your mom. Like having your kids' drawings on the fridge is one thing and it's amazing. But now we can through a prestigious technique called marquage, we can put it into the bag. So you're kind of freezing that moment in time.
Right.
And also you have a piece of your kids or your grand or whoever you meet with.
Right.
That's super sentimental, but it is a luxury product.
Was that part of your plan or it just organically worked out that way?
It just organically worked out. So if we had to rewind the clock and you had to tell me, Adrian, are you going to make bags with kids' drawings on it? I'd be like, oh my God, you must be nuts. Like that's definitely not going to happen. I'm not going to do that. But it was interesting how the very first product we did was a men's wallet. And the lady who placed the order, she was like, oh, but I want my kids drawing on it. I was like, oh my God, that sounds really cute. Let's try that. And I mean, she was like 4 or 5 years old when she did this like picture of herself and mommy and daddy. And what she then told me later on was that this was actually a picture that she drew of her and her mom and her stepfather. So it was almost like the kids accepting him into the family. And then that's why I realized, like, what can I do that really separates me from other brands? Like, Louis Vuitton does like the marquage techniques and they use like known symbols and so forth. But if I incorporate something like that into the piece and we do it really, really, really well, then you have a great product that sells because people aren't just buying a beautiful designer product that's made really well and smells good and will last forever, but it's so personal without it being tacky or kitsch or something, which is wonderful.
And difficult.
Difficult, exactly. And I think that's what people pay pretty good money for. Like, it makes business sense because of course it's difficult to scale, but you have every one bag that we deliver, we usually get like say 2 or 3 clients who then buy because of that person. And so the client becomes the influencer. So from a marketing perspective, like it makes a ton of sense. And all of the commercial stuff aside, just for a second, like as a designer, as an artist, as a young kid who had a big dream to build a business, like, yes, all of these things are great, but to see someone love and use your product is one of the best things ever. And that's kind of like what I'm really building this business on is hyper-personalization. Is like, how do we take something that is Orchard Road is like the Fifth Avenue of Singapore. Like you can get any bag at any price point in any material and there will be thousands of different options. Yet there's no one who's really doing something at this level of personalization, which of course is difficult because, as you would know, like it's very,
there's
very
no
difficult to scale. There's no scale. But maybe that's a good segue into the next part of the chat. How do we scale this? Like, what can we do? So thanks to the pandemic, and I'm saying that very respectfully because it was a horrid time for all of us.
As a result of the pandemic.
As a result of the pandemic, commerce on mobile and other forms of technology, such as like shipping and 3D customization, augmented reality, and those things, we've plugged all of those things into our brand now. So we have 2 products, like it's still beta phase, but we have 2 products that's launched on the site where people can kind of build their own product.
Right.
It's kind of very similar to the Nike ID prospect. Like, I mean, it looks really cool. What I love is like you can view it in augmented reality. Like it's a really
multiple views and so forth.
Multiple views. You can turn it around. You can see it in AR, depict the size. Like, I mean, see what your design would look like. And the other thing is back to our value as a business around hyper personalization. Like if I had to now produce a collection and it kind of goes against what we've built.
It's asymmetrical.
Value. Yeah. We still have this value of customization, personalization at the core of the brand. Yet we've got 2 products that are launched. We made our first sale the other day where somebody went online and they built their own product and placed the order. It went straight to the factory and I don't have to be involved with that order.
Do you have to buy a plane ticket every time a bag is sold?
If they're 12,000 and plus, then No, so I actually have clients who have flown me in to personally deliver bags for them. Yeah, so that's...
Wow.
And I was like, these bags don't fly economy. Neither do I.
The bag and myself will be flying plus.
Plus, exactly. We need a flatbed.
Oh my
God. To quickly get back to the scaling thing. So as a young business who's trying to do something different, like when carving out a niche for ourselves, how do we scale this? And as a result of the pandemic, like the technology available on mobile commerce, e-commerce technology, blockchain, all of those things, it kind of gave entrepreneurs like myself the ability to build a business that supports this model where people can customize and build their own piece, see what it looks like, viewed in augmented reality. We're not sitting in a store and hoping it would sell.
Yeah.
Everything gets made because somebody wanted it made. And so from an overhead or a business perspective, like none of my capital is tied up in stock. None of my capital is tied up in having a storefront, having staff and those things. So that makes overhead. So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's still difficult to scale, but I've kind of built a name around that, which is really cool. And that's what we're running with. And I think if we look at the industry, thousands of brands produce stock. hoping that it would sell, putting it in stores, and and some of them are doing really, really well. A business like mine, it is going to be too much of a risk to try and do that. But that doesn't mean that we're going to delete stock from our plan going forward. We will still follow this rule of customization and hyper-personalization, and perhaps do collaborative efforts with, say, some public figures and so forth, where we will do capsule collections at a later stage. So really kind of honing in, what is the Adrian Furstenburg brand about? And that kind of ties down to one values, which is we like things to be personalized. We like things to be customized. We like things to be kind of one-off, rare. Not everybody has it. And also not too different that you're putting yourself out of the market.
Well, that's interesting because you're speaking to sustainability in materials that are not perceived sustainable, right? Which it's really fascinating because that takes you to kind of what you're doing now. But the fact that you're doing one-off I don't like calling them one-off pieces. We'll just call them bespoke, right?
Bespoke, yeah.
Bespoke. But it's a fascinating model because so many designers, there was a brand, and I won't go into names, it's not hard to find, that was from Australia. I mean, she's doing other things, who tried doing bespoke, had to deal with the factory, had a shop and shop at Bloomingdale's, and had, I think it was like an iPad of some description that was there where you could pick this, that. But, if you're selling in a certain retail environment, then the product needs to be sold at that price point accordingly. And it needs to, right? Like if you're going into Macy's, you are expecting a price point, nor would they purchase something. Like I tried having a program with them and, that was more customized and and I made it all the way to the DMM. And I finally spoke with her and we had this meeting because you work your way up and you've been in retail. You've seen how the people behind the scenes, it's all very rough around the edges. And then the further up they go, they get offices out of cubicles and then the offices get bigger and then they get views. And we made it to this lovely woman's office and she said, I think the program's amazing. I think the collaboration construct is amazing. However, our customers have absolutely no interest and our floor staff is only there to check you out. They're not there to educate. They're not there to sell you. They're there to who's going to ring me up and who's going to get me a Macy's credit card and who's going to be there to say, do you want to use your Macy's card for this? So it's completely environmental and it's completely transactional and it's unapologetic and that's fine. But as a designer going into it, to say, and I've spoken about this before, to say things are bespoke or limited edition, 9 times out of 10, it's because the designer doesn't have economies of scale. The designer is new. The designer is green, not in the sustainable sense, but they're new and they don't know how to make something and they over-purchased stock and they don't have the ability to replicate what they've done to bring their costs down. So I applaud you for being able to do this and to last this long. I mean, what is it? It's been 6+ years that you've been able to evolve and grow into that. So, after year 5, it's okay, I'm in it,
I'm doing this. Yeah. This is, I must say it's not been easy. And very much, it's really, really, really hard because basically you're fighting against all of these other brands at all of these other price points. But I think that was one of the key things that I'm now super thankful for is because after winning, I did start out and I produced stock and looking into retail and everything else. And it's a lot of money. It's a lot of stress. And
the cost of doing business at retail. And I always tell designers, don't poo-poo the boutiques because the boutiques, they pay you up front. You ship UPS, you get your money immediately. But you go into retail, it's you're in the minus as soon as you start. Getting the UPC codes, getting approved, having to read the fat book to get it in, having to have a DC, a warehouse, and so forth. And then learning the difference between, shipping from the factory overseas, shipping from landed, it's the learning curve in itself. You better hope you've got someone or else assume you're going to lose at least 20 grand on the learning curve itself.
Oh, for sure.
At a minimum.
I listened to Rebecca Minkoff's book recently and she speaks of these things. And I think there's a distinct difference in location where one is based.
100%.
A business model like this will be tricky in the United States. Yeah. Because there is there's people buy, they want it now and everything else. And especially because retail shopping in department stores is such a big thing. Yeah. It is kind of difficult to carve out a niche. In a place like Singapore and other countries, it takes a long time to build a brand around that because there is this immediate thing but they're small. They can't produce stock and put it into a store. And I had to kind of sit with that concept, like, what is my value what is my goal as an entrepreneur? Am I being driven by just want to make money, or am I being driven by just ego, where, because it sounds great, like, I'm in Bergdorf, so I'm in Masons or so forth, but you've got to be financially, but then what? You've got to be very strong, financially strong to be able to get you into that space. So what I've done was I really analyzed my customer. I was like,
and that is what I always talk to. What does she eat for breakfast? What car does she drive?
What does she drive? Yeah.
Yeah. You have to know those things.
And that is what kept me on this road. And I've built, of course, I can grow much more successfully in dollar value as an entrepreneur. But if I look at it factually, what is my cost of operation versus my margins and what I sell for and what I do and what I really enjoy as a business owner, because I don't worry have to shit about sorry, my language, about inventory and and all of the administration that goes into running a retail business. I get a lot of joy from the products that I sell, which is the artistic element. The profit margin made sense because you are in the luxury space. You are people, if you think US dollar, it starts at about $1,800. And I recently sold a bag for $12,000, which is quite a good margin on it. And the other bit is the way you get to know your client, that is gold. Because firstly, you don't just have a client who purchases from you. She speaks about who you are.
Yeah.
She tells people she knows that she trusts you, and this is a really great gift. Most of my clients, and I think I can't know the exact numbers now, but we're looking at about, say, maybe between 55 and 60% are all returning clients, who keep on. So you have the loyalty element as well. So I had to make do with my ego.
That's your 20%. That's your 20%, because 80% of your business comes from your 20% of your customers. So that's a pretty amazing percentage rate.
Return. No, absolutely. Yeah. And I think one of the main things, I had to sit with myself and have a conversation with my ego, quote unquote. Do you want to be world famous and big and massive? Because that's one direction. Or do you want something beautiful and manageable and a really cool business? And I chose the latter because what do I enjoy? I enjoy traveling a lot. I enjoy taking good care of my health. That includes my physical and mental health. I have time to do the things that I love, which means to live in Singapore, to have great friends and everything else. And my business is manageable. And the money that I get from it, yes, it's volatile because you're basically, quote unquote, selling couture type of pieces. But financially, looking back at what the brand has achieved, we are much more steady now than we were, say, maybe 3 years ago or 4 years ago. So there's always a place for growth. But I was am I comfortable with the place that I've carved out for myself? And that's the key, because I'm taking that core element of what I've built this business on, and I'm extrapolating some other ideas onto that. And it seems to be working.
No, but the thing is that I really want to point out that you cannot become a single brand, solopreneur, entrepreneur, blah, 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 and hit that luxury mark overnight. And I think that's a very important point to emphasize to designers who listen, that so many of them assume when they start that people would be willing to spend 800 plus for unknown designers. And that is not true. And I think that's important to point out, because you've been in business since 2017. Granted, you weren't at this point when you started. Nobody is. But the evolution of your brand has taken you to this place, right? And so many designers assume, that limited edition, no one gives a crap. You're too new. You don't have a customer base. You have to build that. And that does not happen overnight, right?
No, definitely not that.
To have an Adrian Furstenburg bag aligned with the Louis and so forth, you have to be very, very clear of what your USP, your unique selling point is in order to get to that point, right? This may have been accidental to get you where you are, but to sustain that cannot be, right? And that's a very key point I want to emphasize, because what you're doing is scale, but not scale. You streamline the online process of purchase. However, what you're putting into it for a small business is justified because you can afford to. You've just spoken about your quality of life. You're able to manage this. So perhaps when you continue to grow, maybe you'll have other people doing it. Maybe the drawings, but today this makes sense. And I think that's just a very important point to point out, because so many people, when they start, because they don't know how to buy materials, or they've overbought, or they spent too much, or they purchased materials that are from Italy, not knowing any better, with no brand, no design. No, I think it's a cautionary tale of every designer. I want an Italian bag and I want this. And especially to female designers or people who identify as female in that regard, that they assume that they're creating a bag that they think is missing for their day-to-day life. However, number one, I've seen more designers not carry their own bags, which is a mistake because that writes off marketing expenses. You wear your bag out, that's a marketing expense, number one, all the time. And number two, the retail beyond D2C, the retail who will purchase said bag are not department stores. And if you yourself are not shopping at the boutiques, then you're not even your own customer. And therefore, you miss the mark. 100%.
Completely missed them up. And you know what? You hit the nail on the head, because if we take this, I'm sure the listeners are very much young designers, people who want to make this, people have either been part of Handbag Designer Awards or want to be part of it. And I think there are some key elements to take into consideration. What does it mean to be a handbag designer? Because even to this day, many people are like, oh, that's interesting. That's not the typical career choice.
Right.
So firstly, put yourself, you're not in a typical career choice. Number one, it is tough. It is different. It's got all of these things. If I rewind the clock and I think back about what got me into this. So for example, when I applied to Handbag Designer Awards, I applied twice before I got in. And that was the last hour. If I don't get in, I'm not going to make it. But I had to look for something that's going to make someone else believe in me as much as I believe in myself. Mm-hmm. And that is hard. That is really hard, because there are brilliant designers out there with a lot of money who can have all of the connections and it can do really well, and they are struggling as well. So I think the important thing is okay, what really drives me? Mm-hmm. Is it just profit? Then I would suggest do something else, because it is really, really hard, because you need something that kind of takes you through those really difficult times.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this to anyone, I'm saying this to younger Adrian. You're not that special.
Oh my God. I've had to tell people that. And it's so awful. I call it basement to Beyonce, where you get a little bit of attention. You are a quote unquote overnight success. And then boom, you forget that, the sun is still going to go up. The sun's going to go down, and you are replaceable. You are so replaceable.
No, for sure. I mean, I think it is about, of course, I'm being really honest here. There were times that I was thinking, did I make the right decision to choose this career? It was really hard. And especially moving countries and setting up shop in a new place and everything else, that was unbelievably hard. But one of the things that I still hang on to today is, as silly as this may sound, is who am I doing this for? Mm-hmm. If I'm just doing it for myself, then just do it for yourself. Then keep it as art.
Right.
That's the one thing. And one of the things, I love wearing my own stuff because I think they're really beautiful and well made and all of these things. But when I do a personal unboxing or have someone that I deliver a bag to personally, they bought that because they really wanted it.
Yep.
I managed to have hundreds, maybe if not thousands of conversations with women and ask them, what do you want? And that's how we developed the design tarot technique, which is it's literally like a tarot reading. And we have certain key points to get to a beautiful bag for them. It's not an it bag. I am next to Chanel's, Hermes, Louis Vuitton, Prada, everything else. And there's the rest of Kate Spade and Tory Burch and everything else. That one is also fighting against. But it comes down to that, I had, I said, hundreds, maybe even thousands of conversations with my prospective or current clients on what is it that you want. And then I marry it with, I'm not going to give you everything that you want. I'm still the designer. This is what I think. So having a little bit of attitude and a little bit of flair, because if you're a designer, you got to that point where you believe in yourself enough to say, oh, maybe I can build a business. So having these two things marry one another. And I use the word marry because that's exactly what it is. Does it make sense for your client and does it make sense for you? And I think finding that is really, really hard because it's not overnight. It just takes time. And I think, and I've heard you, you and I have had a number of conversations and I've listened to you speak and I've seen some things on social media, and it is the guidance that you provide is very simple. Know your customer. Really, really know your customer. And I think the thing about being a handbag designer is this is one of the things that helped me. I'm part of the Singapore Fashion Council and we mentor some of the young designers and so forth. And the other question that I would add to that is what is the end game?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want a really big business, or do you want something boutique and small, or something in the middle? Like, I mean, answering and not answering that immediately. Like, when you say, I want to have a really big business, what is involved in that? Because then you need to know taxes, distribution, legal, shipping, environmental impact. It's admin. It's rates, it's taxes, it's all of these things. Are you up for that?
Yeah.
If you want to be just a designer, like if you feel like, oh my God, all I want to do is create, I don't worry about selling, I don't worry about this, then I would say, you know what, apply for a really cool job. Like, I mean, there are great opportunities for people who can do beautiful design.
Yeah.
If you want to be an entrepreneur and if you want to make millions and millions and millions of dollars quickly, do something else.
Yeah.
Like, because this is not a get rich quick scheme. Like,
no.
it is very much a
long game.
It's an art. It's a long game. It's an art and a science. Like I said earlier, like, I mean, I'm about 5 or 6 years in. Now only I'm like, oh, there's momentum. And there are still some very bad months. Like, I mean, they're still like, oh, but that's the nature of entrepreneurship. Is like, I stuck onto believing in myself as an artist, as a designer. I coupled it up with what my client wants, which is absolutely crucial. And I kind of like zoomed out of the whole picture and I was like, what is the end game?
Yeah.
Because I think like once you have those three things, I mean, there's no such thing as a recipe for success, but it is essentially like, I mean, knowing yourself, knowing your client, and knowing the industry. Like those are the main things.
I agree. So just to wrap up, talk to us about the material you've created. You know, we don't have that much more time, but I would feel guilty on being able to give you an opportunity to talk about it.
No. Thank you. That's very, very exciting. So of course, as a designer, like, I mean, sustainability, environmental impact, human impact, like all of these things are always at the forefront of many, many discussions. So I work with leather, mainly bovine. Like, I mean, we use Epsom from France, but I follow a vegetarian diet. So I've always had a
ironically.
Like, so I work with leather, but I don't eat meat. In New York, 2017, I had a conversation with Modern Meadow around like lab grown leather and everything else. And it was like
Modern Meadow does the mushrooms, I believe.
That's Michael Works. Yeah.
Right.
Modern Meadow does biopolymers. Like, and so they started in lab grown leather. It was still very early days.
Yeah.
Last year, May, Kering, that owns Gucci and Bottega, the big holding company, invested a large chunk of a Series A round into a company called Vitro Labs in Silicon Valley to do lab grown leather. So that's when I realized here must be something. So in Singapore, there's a tannery that's owned by LVMH that does croc skin. In the luxury leather goods industry, crocodile and ostrich and these leathers are from animals that are bred and culled, usually only for the leather. It's not like regular bovine skin that is byproduct of meat and in massive supply. So there's a lot of pushback from organizations like Slay and PETA. So a client of mine who has spent a lot of money with me already, her husband invested in a lab-grown meat business in Singapore, and I asked for a meeting. And this fellow who's in the lab-grown meat space, like, I mean, who wants to meet this South African handbag designer, which is just so strange. And we had a coffee and I was like, what is the possibility of growing exotic leather in a lab? And cut a long story, it's short story long, short story medium. Went back to his team and they have IP in growing skin. And then they offered me a joint venture with them. Would you like to partner with us to create this product? Because I've got experience in leather and luxury, and we have the tanning like right here in Singapore. And Singapore is one of the leaders in the whole world when it comes to the biotech or lab-grown space, because it doesn't grow any of its own materials. So lab-grown meat is the very first approved lab-grown chicken happened in Singapore.
Wow.
So we have all of the ingredients. With that, we won the Vogue Innovation Award.
That's amazing. Vogue Singapore.
Vogue Singapore, yeah. So which opened us up to a lot of publicity and really cool connections. Former CEO of Cartier is on our board. So the goal basically is like the Adrian Furstenburg brand exists on its own, but myself as an entrepreneur is venturing into another startup called Project X for exotic leather. So
not X like what Twitter is.
Oh God, no.
I know. I just want to clarify that it's Project X, not
Project EX. EX for exotic.
Okay.
So we're kind of in a bit of a race, but we want to grow the world's first exotic leather in laboratory. So we're off to Geneva in about 3 weeks' time. We have conversations with some of the luxury brands over there. We're part of the Luxury Innovation Summit. So the goal is, how do we yield a real leather product? genuine leather that has A-grade quality, that has a lesser impact on the environment because we're not using formaldehyde and chloroform to remove the muscle and muscle and fat from the skin. So it's a genuine leather product, less environmental impact, and is quote unquote cruelty free.
And also luxury.
And also luxury. And that's exactly what we're doing. So
that is very so exciting.
Yeah, and that's big business. So it's like, so as an entrepreneur, following my dream and my passion, like with building this handbag brand that is like really loving and amazing and gives me a lot of joy, pays my salary, has given me the opportunity to keep a wide scope on what is out there. And I believe from a financial perspective, like this is going to be a big thing. Like we're still at an early stage, but I think this is a big thing. We've had some really cool conversations with brands like Dior and Louis Vuitton and Gucci and Yves Saint Laurent. So yeah.
Right space, or right place, right time. Look at you.
Right place, right time. Yeah, exactly.
It's about time when you encapsulate it like Jesus, like about time. Come on, after everything's put in it.
Well, no, exactly. Yeah. So it's interesting. So it's full circle. So I'm kind of going back to
the farm.
Materials. Yeah, exactly. See? Back to materials. Yeah, that's the thing.
Is your dad still around to see all this?
No, unfortunately. Like he unfortunately passed during COVID, but we're still in contact. Like, I mean, he's still here in spirit, but yeah, like, I mean, he guides me in those ways. So that's good.
Well, Adrian, thank you so very much for your time. This has been enlightening beyond. I can only wish you good things because only good things should come your way. Tell everybody how they can follow you and find you because they absolutely should.
Okay, cool. But firstly, before I get to that, I just want to thank you because thanks to you and the Handbag Designer Awards, I am who I am today. And I remember when I won Vogue, you were one of the first people that I sent a message to because what you have done for me and people like me is unbelievable. So I just want to give like a huge shout out to you as an individual. You make things come true. You really do. And
thank you.
For those who want to, like, I mean, I would say the best is just get me on Instagram. Very easy. Adrian Furstenburg. B-U-R-G.
I was going to say, got to separate that.
First, got to separate that. Yeah, it's not the same. So yeah, Adrian Furstenburg on Instagram. And then, of course, all of the other links like to the website and TikTok and so forth is on there as well.
Oh, my God. And everything else. Yes. All right, Adrian, thank you so much. And thank you for being part of the Handbag Designer 101 podcast. I can't wait to see what you're going to do next.
Oh, my God. So exciting. Thank you. So good to be here.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to rate and review and follow us on every single platform at Handbag Designer. Thanks so much. See you next time.